The abuse that's been suffered is real. This particular investigation has been misrepresented, it's been exaggerated, and also I will say there's been untruths given out. You've not got the clear fact of what this case is about. It's absolutely appalling, and it's done nothing to help the people who were the true victims.
An investigation into the investigation is needed. Questions need to be asked. A public inquiry is essential. Departing Senior Investigating Officer Mick Gradwell says he inherited a mess, a multi-million-pound mess.
I've never seen anything like this in 30 years. In respect of sexual offences, I've been a detective for 22 years. I've dealt with and can show convictions for rapes and sex offences, you know, by predatory paedophiles, as well as a huge number of murders. But I've just never, ever seen police work in this way. I really am absolutely shocked by what's gone on. It is abhorrent behaviour.
The excavation of the former children's home Haute de la Garenne turned from a several £1,000 exterior dig to tearing the historic house apart and finding nothing, at a cost of millions. There were no cellars. The floor plan would have revealed they were just voids under the floorboards even before the digging began. There were no torture chambers, the shackles being bed springs, and certainly no partial remains of a child. In fact, just a coconut. Each forensic expert costing around £100 per hour for the months they were digging. They were only due in the island briefly to search the exterior of the home. That was the plan. So why did they go in? Conversations with other officers just days before show how former boss Lenny Harper was adamant not to go in. He said there was no evidence, no intelligence, and it was bound to be covered in blood from spotty teenagers. And yet the police did go in with the help of cadaver dog Eddie, staying at the Lorazon with his owner Martin Grime for almost 4 months and charging more than £600 per day. A force in the UK would send a dog from their team for less than 50. Eddie identified 7 sites, including the home of the coconut. He's the same dog that caused Madeleine McCann's parents months of misery, having found the scent of death in their Portugal apartment. And that's why dog handlers usually work in pairs, to avoid such mistakes. That, coupled with the cost of the officers standing guard at the gates of Haute de la Garenne for months, meaning the total cost to the taxpayer, just for that part of the inquiry, is millions. And no physical evidence was discovered that's been used in any court case so far, and none, it seems, that will help with any future prosecutions. Since the cases have been handed over to Lancashire Detective Superintendent Mick Gradwell, the blame for the mistakes has lain with former top boss Lenny Harper and also suspended Chief Officer Graham Power. But is the criticism really justified? Well, I spoke to one senior investigating officer from the UK who explained his role to me. He said the SIO is in charge of coordinating all resources, the finances, the investigation strategy and the media strategy. They're also in charge of the victims, the complainants and the wider community. If something goes wrong, he says, they're the one to blame. And it seems Lenny Harper was spending too. Trips to London for security meetings, 2 nights at a time for a 1-hour appointment, dining at top restaurants like the Bombay Brasserie. But why was this allowed to happen, and why wasn't the spending curbed? The simple answer: because a financial manager was never appointed. Even though it was deemed a Category A inquiry, it just never happened. And why weren't the other officers, experienced independent officers, asking questions? Where was the evidence? Why was Lenny Harper courting the media? And why was he digging for evidence of violent and sexual assault when, in his words, there was no intelligence to suggest those things, and the suspects in the more serious cases were already dead and never to face justice?
Every time I tried to find out why something had been called suspicious, I was amazed at what I found. I mean, what do people think they should find when someone describes something as the partial remains of a child? I would suggest it is far more than a small piece of material that big. And then when you say, like, oh, the shackles in the exhibits room, then you try and say, well, OK, where are they? Well, why are they being called shackles? Well, we don't actually know. And then, well, you know, just what has been going on. And every time I asked a question, where's this strategy? Where's this plan? Well, what are you going to do with it? People gave me embarrassed looks and saying, well, we know, but it was difficult to tell him. And so I just found, professionally, my judgment, a complete and total mess that was nothing like any major investigation that has been run in the United Kingdom in decades.
The investigation is now drawing to a close, and a full report of the finances is expected then. But we already know that the inquiry has cost islanders millions of pounds, and many more people much more than that.